She watched the knife fall and felt nothing. The clatter on the linoleum sliced the night into an unfamiliar shape. Leah realized she would be improvising a response for a stranger. Leah had come to her sister Sarah's apartment for coffee and a late apology. Instead, she found a man bent over the sink, blood seeping between his fingers. Her phone buzzed with Sarah's text, "Are you okay?" And Leah didn't reply because the right word didn't exist. By trade, Leah was a school counselor. She named feelings for a living, taught teens to breathe through panic, to label anger before it devoured them. She believed small acts of care could avert catastrophe. That belief felt thin now. The man was no older than 30, eyes rimmed in red, a broken vase scattering white petals across the table. Leah moved because movement mattered. Waiting was a decision. She checked his pulse, pressed a towel to the wound, and felt the damp heat of urgency under her palms. He mouthed, "Why didn't you call?" And Leah wanted to answer with protocol: call ambulance, apply pressure, but the words felt inadequate. She had counseled kids who reacted violently after humiliation, read studies about anger spirals, taught about triggers and coping. Knowledge sat like a lamp beside her, illuminating options but not replacing action. Paramedics arrived, efficient and practiced, and the man whispered Sarah's name as they loaded him into the ambulance. Leah watched the doors close, the siren retreating into the city's hum, and found herself thinking of the small things that accumulate into crisis: a cruel joke, a missed bill, a lover's silence. People gathered injuries at the margins, and sometimes one fold too many made them tear. Sarah collapsed into the doorway with mascara-streaked cheeks, apologizing without pause. The sisters made tea, hands busy with cups, and the shock settled into a new shape, an ache that threaded their speech. Leah's counselor instinct reached for explanation, for a way to prevent replay. But explanations can become shields that spare the heart. In the week that followed, Leah's work changed, subtly but insistently. She listened for humiliation in intake sessions, for comments that had lodged like a splinter. A student named Marcus came in after an incident. He had lashed out at a classmate who posted an embarrassing video. When Leah asked what had led to his reaction, Marcus spoke of layered slights, a teacher's aside, classmates' laughter, a father's dismissal. Leah offered language. It's not just one blow. It's the stacking. She taught pause, journaling, and accountability practices that asked kids to name the chain of small harms before they burst. At night, Leah reread papers about escalation, perceived injustice, depleted self-control, social narratives that normalize revenge. The facts lined like mile markers, useful but cold. She had always believed in repair, apologies, restitution, learning, but repair required acknowledgement. Without it, wounds calcified. She found herself questioning tidy categories. Victim versus perpetrator blurred when the man from Sarah S. apartment appeared on the news as a suspect. The headline carried relief and moral closure, but Leah knew legal outcomes rarely healed the interior shrapnel. Responsibility mattered, but so did the conditions that allowed harm to seed. Her own flaws pressed at the edges of this work. Leah realized she had depended on tidy models to keep chaos at bay. Her empathy sometimes turned to avoidance because feeling too much made action complicated. She had a tendency to overanalyze to delay discomfort. Recognizing that pattern became another kind of deterrent. One rainy afternoon, Marcus returned with a quieter face. He had attended anger management and apologized to the student he'd hurt. It wasn't dramatic, no confessions in the schoolyard. No cinematic embrace, but it was honest labor, small, awkward, human. Leah felt a cautious optimism. Change rarely arrived in headlines. It arrived in daily redemptions. She began to focus her interventions upstream, meet with teachers about microaggressions, encourage parents to notice offhand comments, run workshops on naming small cruelties. Prevention, she decided, was less about spectacle and more about sustained attention. The patient act of noticing before resentment calcified. Still, thresholds worried her. When did annoyance harden into violent intent? She thought of social experiments, of how ordinary people bend under certain pressures, and worried about the ordinary cruelties we normalize. Her practice adjusted. In every intake, she asked not only what happened, but what kept happening. That change in phrasing shifted conversations from isolated events to patterns. On a morning when sunlight sifted through blinds, Leah paused outside Sarah's building, touching the brick as if to test its solidity. The city kept its indifferent rhythm, but Leah moved through it with a new humility. Knowledge could map routes to harm, but it was human attention that might reroute them. She wrote notes in her journal, noticed the tiny injuries, ask early, insist on repair. The list felt alarmingly small next to the magnitude of human pain, but Leah trusted small acts. That night, she dreamed of a knife fallen in slow motion and woke with her palms oddly steady. She would carry the night as weight into her sessions and into the small places where teenagers learn to be human. When she later heard on the radio that the man had been arrested, Leah felt neither triumph nor simple sorrow, only a complicated knot of relief and continuing concern. Systems had acted, but so much remained unwound in private. Leah returned to school and to Marcus and to the ordinary business of prevention. Her lamp still burned, but she tended it differently now, not with theories alone, but with alert, sustained care. She promised herself a new practice, to speak plainly when she sensed corrosive slights, to name humiliation before it hardened. She would schedule community talks, push for early interventions, and hold open hours for students who felt invisible. Small rituals, she thought, might save someone. As the city spun, Leah walked home with the memory of a falling knife and a resolve tiny, practical, fierce, to notice the unnoticed. She would not look away again, not easily nor forever. Maya kept a battered notebook in her coat pocket where she collected stray facts, a statistic about impulse control, a clipped headline, a line from a book. Collecting details gave her work shape. She was a feature writer who turned messy motives into paragraphs, but curiosity sometimes tipped into obsession. After Leah's night, Maya followed the fracture across neighborhoods, wanting to know which small slights stacked until someone broke. She drove to Sarah's building with a recorder and questions. Neighbors offered fragments. A muttering man ignored repair requests. Teenagers joking cruelly. Ordinary pieces, layered, suggested slow erosion rather than sudden collapse. Maya resisted a tidy villain. She wanted to see how ordinary neglect could erode someone's sense of fairness. Leah, quieter than her article suggested, spoke about prevention and naming humiliation early. "I sleep in pieces," she admitted. "I worry I will mistake distance for professionalism." Maya heard the protector's fear and felt the story complicate. The person who fixes others lived with fragility of her own. Maya found an old longitudinal study tracking micro-humiliations. It had been shelved and forgotten. Dr. Klein, the retired psychologist, handed over boxes of messy data, interviews, notes, and patterns. The study suggested persistent small injustices diminished self-regulation. That clarity chilled Maya. The arrested man had not appeared from nowhere. Reading transcripts through the night, Maya traced lives and margins, job loss, isolation, friends who laughed instead of confronting. Data explained trajectories but did not excuse violence. She rewrote drafts until the language balanced accountability with context. Rosa, who had known the arrested man, confessed that the group had joked when he lost control because confronting him was easier than conflict. Ordinary avoidance, Maya realized, was part of the scaffolding that enabled harm. Her piece had to name those small failures. Her editor urged drama. Maya resisted sensationalism. She proposed a story that showed patterns and offered practical fixes: school repair programs, landlord accountability, community listening posts. When published, responses were mixed offensive comments and teachers requesting curricula. A small grant arrived to pilot intervention workshops. The work shifted Maya. She began to keep names as promises, calling sources back and visiting quietly, blurring reporter and neighbor roles. A hostile voicemail warned her of risk. She learned to protect sources while continuing. Curiosity became stewardship. At a public forum, Leah described early interventions. Maya watched the woman who had held a towel to a stranger now speak steadily about naming small injuries. Afterward, the two exchanged a look of mutual understanding. These moments felt like progress, uneven but real. Maya's personal life frayed, missed dinners, late nights with notes and maps taped to walls. Amir, a friend, urged her to rest. She promised small repairs to herself: call a friend, make tea, close the laptop. Those promises mattered. Meeting Rosa again without recorders, Maya listened to quiet stories of small kindnesses and late losses. Rosa said, "We were afraid of discomfort. We're learning to name it." Maya carried that sentence home. The magazine's piece did not end cycles of harm, but it nudged conversation toward repair. Teachers started micro-intervention circles. One classroom practiced apology scripts and sent Leah a photo. Maya kept the image in her notebook like a talisman. She called city council members, wrote op-eds, and pushed for the listening post. Progress was slow and incremental, but actionable. Maya learned that repair was daily labor, not a headline, but a practice of attention. Maya woke 2 nights later to a text from a teacher in a school across town. "We tried the apology script. They surprised us." The attached photo showed nervous teenagers holding folded cards, faces awkward and real. The image softened the edges of her exhaustion. Small rituals, she realized, had a contagious stubbornness. She began hosting informal sessions with neighborhood organizers and teachers, not as a reporter, but as a collaborator. They met in a church basement and a library conference room, trading exercises that taught students to name harms and practice repair language. Maya listened and sometimes led, learning to hold attention rather than fold it into prose. She started asking differently. Instead of pressing for sound bites, she asked, "What next?" and stayed long enough for answers. A council member offered tentative funding for community listening posts. Bureaucracy moved in fits and starts, but the possibility felt like progress. Maya learned to translate qualitative stories into metrics, how to measure whether micro-interventions reduced escalations, aligning narrative with accountability. Her relationship with Leah deepened into a professional alliance. They organized a teacher workshop filled with role plays and restorative language. Watching teachers stumble then try again, Maya felt the slow joy of unglamorous persistence. Dr. Klein's boxes and Rosa's confession no longer only explained risk. They helped shape changeable conditions. At home, she rotated between furious productivity and exhaustion. She called in favors, wrote grant drafts, and spent hours on calls with social workers. Once, exhausted, she nearly missed a visit to Rosa. Instead, Rosa arrived with bread and sat in Maya's kitchen, refusing to let dignity or distance wedge them apart. That ordinary generosity felt like a threshold crossing. Months later, a modest evaluation suggested classrooms using repair practices showed fewer escalations. The sample was small and the result tentative, but it mattered. Maya wrote a follow-up that focused on process. Teachers offering concrete tips, organizers sharing pitfalls. Comment threads still argued, but now practitioners contributed practical advice. The conversation moved slightly toward tools and away from only blame. On a late autumn evening, Maya walked past the school where Leah worked and saw students on the steps, trading cards and laughter that did not sound brittle. A bus rumbled by. A distant siren rose and faded. The city remained imperfect and dangerous in places, but attention sustained and ordinary could reroute trajectories. Maya folded her notebook closed, heavier with names, dates, and small successes, and walked home knowing curiosity could be a practiced kindness. Notice, call out, and mend what frayed. Leah had begun to sleep better, or so she told herself. In truth, her sleep was thin and breakable, but she was learning to accept the night as a companion rather than a threat. Her office at the school had new posters about conflict resolution. The hallway smelled of pencil shavings and disinfectant. She kept her lamp lit even during daylight hours, as if steady light could dissuade shadows from gathering. One morning, as she unlocked her office, she found a folded note pushed under the door. The handwriting was careful but uneven. It read, "I think I might hurt someone. I don't know how to stop it." No name, no other words. Her hands trembled as she held the note. It was not the first time she had seen a cry for help. but it felt different, like a stone dropped in deep water. She sat at her desk and read it again, then once more, hearing in her mind the unspoken voice of a student who felt themselves edging toward a dangerous act. Maya arrived an hour later, unannounced, carrying a paper bag with breakfast muffins. She noticed Leah's distracted eyes and asked, "What's wrong?" Leah slid the note across the desk. Maya read it slowly, her journalist's face softening. "You'll find them," she said quietly. "You've done it before." Leah wasn't so sure. She spent the day in sessions, but her attention flickered. Between meetings, she compared handwriting samples from permission slips and essays. She asked teachers discreetly if anyone had been acting withdrawn or unusually tense. No one stood out. That evening, Leah sat in her car in the nearly empty parking lot, phone in hand, debating whether to call the police. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Reporting too soon could harm an innocent student. Reporting too late could risk something far worse. The knife she once saw falling in slow motion replayed in her mind. She lowered the phone and started the engine, deciding to wait one more day. Maya, sensing Leah's turmoil, began digging through her own network, teachers, counselors, even students who had once trusted her. She believed that stories left traces. Someone somewhere might have seen a shift, a subtle sign. The next day, a teacher named Mr. Jensen came to Leah's office during lunch. He hesitated in the doorway before speaking. "There's a kid in my homeroom, Tyler. Bright, usually quiet. Lately, he's been snapping at small things. Yesterday, he tore up his math homework when another kid laughed. Maybe nothing, but he shrugged." Leah thanked him and asked Tyler to come by after class. The boy shuffled in with slouched shoulders, his hoodie sleeves pulled down over his fists. He sat silently, his gaze fixed on the carpet. Leah kept her voice steady and calm. "I got a note," she said. "I don't know who wrote it. I just want to listen." Tyler's eyes flicked up, startled, then dropped again. After a long pause, he said, "Sometimes I get so mad I can't breathe. I feel like I'll do something bad. I don't want to. But it's there." The confession was barely above a whisper, but Leah heard it as a door opening. She asked gentle questions when the anger felt strongest, what triggered it, whether he had ever acted on it. Tyler admitted to breaking things in his room, punching his pillow until his hands ached. No harm to others, not yet. Leah praised him for speaking up. She explained how naming the feeling was the first step toward controlling it. They made a plan, daily check-ins, a breathing routine, and a written list of moments when anger surged. That evening, Leah called Maya to share the breakthrough. Maya listened quietly, scribbling notes she wouldn't publish. "You know," Maya said, "stories like Tyler's are the ones that might change the narrative. Not villains, not heroes, just kids caught before they cross a line." Leah thought of the earlier incident with Sarah's neighbor and felt a strange mix of grief and cautious hope. Perhaps this time the trajectory could be shifted. Over the next week, Leah met with Tyler every afternoon. They talked about his father's long absences, the teasing from classmates, the sense of being invisible until he erupted. Leah taught him to pause, 3 slow breaths, counting to 5, and to write down each trigger before acting. Tyler brought a small notebook filled with jagged handwriting and short bursts of feeling. Felt mocked in gym. "Teacher ignored my question. Couldn't find my shoes this morning." These small entries told a larger story of accumulated friction. Meanwhile, Maya pitched a new series to her editor profiles of Intervention in Progress. The editor worried it was too soft for the audience, but Maya argued that prevention was suspenseful in its own way, the tension of a crisis averted. She began shadowing Leah, with the school's permission, careful to keep Tyler's identity protected. As the sessions went on, Tyler showed small signs of change. He lifted his eyes more often. His voice steadied. But one Friday afternoon, he arrived angry, his hands clenched. A classmate had posted a photo of his worn-out sneakers online, mocking him. Leah guided him through breathing, but saw how close he was to exploding. Maya watched from the corner of the room, her heart tight. She wanted to intervene, but knew it was Leah's space. Leah asked Tyler to tear a blank page from his notebook and write every insult he remembered. Then crumple the page and throw it in the trash. Tyler obeyed, the act clumsy but releasing. He slumped back in the chair, exhausted but calmer. Later that night, Leah sat at her desk writing a note to herself. Intervention is not one moment. It's many small ones repeated until the tide shifts. She thought of the original anonymous note and how it had carried both danger and hope. Maya drafted her first article about the ongoing work. She described not a dramatic rescue but the daily grind of listening, the courage of a boy willing to admit his fear of himself, and the quiet persistence of a counselor. She ended the draft with the line, "Sometimes the hero is the person who chooses not to harm." When Leah read the draft, tears pricked her eyes. For the first time since that terrible night at Sarah's apartment, she felt that her work might be planting seeds before the storm, not after. That weekend, Tyler's mother came to see Leah, a tired woman with calloused hands. She thanked Leah for giving her son someone to talk to. "I keep thinking he's just angry at me," she said. Leah reassured her that his anger had roots that went deeper and that he was learning to face it. They discussed ways to support his routines at home. The conversation reminded Leah that intervention was never a single person's task. It required a web family, school, community. She sent Maya a message later, "Write about the web, not just the thread." Maya replied with a simple, "I will." Leah placed the original anonymous note back in her drawer, beside a fresh stack of empty pages, ready for more stories that might arrive folded and trembling. The first frost of winter glazed the school windows, and Leah felt the season's edge in her bones. She had grown used to the steady rhythm of sessions with Tyler, to his notebook and hesitant progress. But in December, the school grew restless. Holidays magnified every absence and every slight. On a gray Thursday afternoon, the principal called Leah to the office. A sophomore named Danny had posted a drawing on a private social account, a shadowy figure with a red streak across its chest and a caption that read, "Sometimes I want it all to stop." A classmate had reported it. The principal's voice was clipped with both worry and impatience. "You've had some success with that boy, Tyler. Maybe you can talk to her before this turns into a crisis." Leah found Danny sitting at the edge of the gym bleachers during study period, sketchbook balanced on her knees. The girl was small for 15, her hair hiding half her face, pencil smudges on her fingers. Leah sat down quietly beside her, leaving a respectful space. "I saw your drawing," Leah said softly. "It was powerful. What did you want it to say?" Danny didn't look up. "It's just a picture. Sometimes pictures hold things we can't say yet," Leah replied. After a long silence, Danny whispered, "It's not about killing anyone. It's about feeling like everything keeps pressing in, like you can't breathe, like you want it to stop before you make a mistake." Leah nodded, hearing the quiver behind the words. "I'm glad you showed it, even if it was just online. It tells me you still want help." They talked for nearly an hour about Danny's father leaving, about nights when she lay awake hearing her parents' old arguments replay in her head, about the way other students teased her for drawing dark scenes. Leah didn't rush. She guided Danny toward describing the feelings rather than acting on them. By the end of the conversation, Donnie agreed to come to Leah's office after school the next day. That evening, Leah called Maya, who had just come home from a city council subcommittee meeting. Maya listened in silence, then said, "The story keeps widening. These are the kids who get missed in the data, the quiet ones. Quiet until they're not," Leah said. "We need to catch them sooner." Maya jotted notes for her next piece, wanting to write about early signals, the drawings, the scribbled notes, the silent flinches that often go unrecognized. The following afternoon, Danny came to Leah's office. She looked wary but less defensive than before. Leah placed a box of colored pencils on the table and asked her to draw what safety would look like if it were a place. Donnie sketched a treehouse, sturdy planks, a ladder that couldn't be pulled up, a lantern glowing inside. When she finished, Leah asked if she had ever felt that safe. Donnie shook her head. Maya sat in on one session later that week with Danny's and Leah's consent. She saw Danny trace the lantern in the treehouse again and again, shading it with a warm yellow pencil. The simple image struck Maya as more revealing than any interview quote. She wrote in her notes, "For some kids, safety is still imaginary." Leah arranged a meeting with Danny's mother, a nurse who worked night shifts. The woman looked exhausted, but relieved that someone at the school had noticed her daughter's quiet distress. Together, they discussed a schedule for regular check-ins and a plan for Danny to start small group counseling. Meanwhile, Tyler continued to make progress, but had setbacks. One afternoon, he burst into Leah's office furious about a new taunt from classmates. Leah had him count his breaths, then guided him to imagine tearing the taunt into strips of paper and burning it in his mind. The exercise calmed him enough to talk. Maya later described the scene as watching a fuse being carefully snuffed out. Winter deepened, and the school held a small assembly on kindness and repair. Leah invited both Tyler and Danny to help design a poster campaign with simple phrases. Pause. Name it. Reach out. Their designs, Tyler's bold block letters and Danny's lantern illustration, were posted in hallways. Some students mocked them, but more than a few stopped to read. One snowy evening, Maya and Leah met for coffee after work. The cafe was warm and smelled of cinnamon. Maya admitted she was struggling with how to keep her articles honest without turning the kids into cautionary exhibits. Leah told her, "Write about their strength, about the small steps. People think suspense is always a cliff's edge. Sometimes it's whether a student chooses to walk into my office instead of walking away." That night, Leah received a late text from Danny. "I almost drew something bad again, but I tried the breathing thing. It helped." Leah responded with a simple, "Proud of you. Keep drawing the lantern." Maya drafted a new feature around that line. The editor hesitated. Less drama, more process, but agreed to run it as part of the ongoing series. The headline read, "The Lantern They Draw Before the Storm." Letters and emails followed from readers, some teachers asking how to spot the signs, some parents admitting they had missed them. A few messages were harsh, claiming the media was glorifying troubled youth. Maya answered those with patient explanations about prevention. Leah clipped one letter from a teacher in another state who had used the article to start a lunchtime support circle for students. She taped it to the inside of her office door where only she could see it, a private reminder that small stories could ripple outward. As the holidays approached, the school halls filled with the smell of pine decorations and restless energy. Leah stayed vigilant. She knew the season's cheer could sharpen the sense of isolation for some students. She checked in on Danny and Tyler daily, quietly praising each small choice they made toward control and self-expression. On the last day before winter break, Danny handed Leah a small sketch, the treehouse lantern now drawn larger, its glow reaching the ground. "For the wall," Danny said shyly. Leah pinned it next to her desk lamp. Maya watched the exchange and felt a rare, quiet kind of suspense, the uncertain but hopeful suspense of wondering how far one small glow could spread. The new year arrived with a brittle chill that clung to the school's brick walls. Leah returned early from winter break to tidy her office, pinning Danny's lantern sketch at eye level above her desk. She straightened the box of pencils, replaced a few worn-down erasers, and sat for a moment in the quiet, feeling the tension that always accompanied January. The first week back was rough. Students dragged themselves into classrooms with slumped shoulders, their holiday cheer drained. Tyler came late to his first session, his jaw tight. Leah noted the red marks on his knuckles, signs he'd been in another fight. "Want to tell me what happened?" she asked gently. Tyler stared at the floor. "My cousin said I'd never change. He called me a lost cause." Leah waited until he looked up. "And what do you think?" "I think I wanted to prove him wrong, but I also wanted to punch him. You're here. That's proof of something," Leah said. She guided him through the breathing exercise, then asked him to write down every word his cousin had said. Slowly, Tyler filled a page. Leah asked him to tear it into strips, drop them in the wastebasket, and imagine the words losing their weight. He did it, still scowling but calmer. Meanwhile, Danny came to sessions carrying new drawings, softer ones, still shaded in charcoal, but with hints of light seeping through clouds. Leah praised the change, careful not to sound overly cheerful. Healing, she knew, could be as fragile as frost on a window. That Friday evening, Maya invited Leah to a small town hall forum where parents and teachers gathered to discuss youth mental health. Maya had been invited to moderate. The hall smelled of old wood and coffee. Parents spoke hesitantly about fear, about not knowing what to say when their kid shut down. One father described how his son's silence had felt like a locked door. Leah listened, recognizing echoes of her own office conversations. When a parent asked how to spot the line between normal teenage moodiness and real danger, Leah answered quietly but firmly. Listen to what they draw, what they write, the late-night words they post online. Those are often the whispers before the shout. The room grew still. Maya saw heads nodding and scribbled a note for her article, Whispers Before the Shout. A few days later, the school faced a new ripple of tension. A rumor spread that Tyler had threatened someone in a hallway argument. Leah called him in before lunch. He insisted it was just words thrown in anger, that he hadn't meant it. His shoulders hunched as he muttered, "Nobody believes I can be different. Believing it yourself comes first," Leah told him. "And proving it through what you do next." She asked him to help her rearrange some of the posters he and Donnie had designed, moving them into spots where students often lingered. At first, he rolled his eyes, but then he taped a lantern poster on the cafeteria wall and stepped back as if seeing it fresh. "Looks less dumb than I thought," he said. Later that week, Donnie approached Leah with a new idea, to paint a mural in the art room based on the lantern sketch. She wanted Tyler to help. Leah encouraged it and got quick approval from the principal, who was relieved to see students channeling energy into something constructive. The mural project brought unexpected changes. Tyler, surprisingly careful with a paintbrush, worked beside Danny in silence most afternoons. Sometimes they exchanged a few shy words. Other students stopped by to watch the mural grow, first the rough outline of the treehouse, then the glow of the lantern, then a broad path leading up to it. Leah often lingered nearby, pretending to organize supplies while quietly observing the way shared work softened their guarded edges. Maya visited to take photos for her next article. She captured Tyler mid-stroke, focused, a faint smear of yellow paint on his wrist. Donnie ducked her head, but let Maya photograph her mixing paints. The headline Maya drafted later read, "Painting a safer place one brushstroke at a time." As the mural neared completion, a fresh crisis emerged. A senior named Lucas, well known for his academic record but often distant, failed to submit college applications and began skipping classes. Teachers dismissed it as senior year blues, but Leah sensed something more. She found Lucas in the library one afternoon, staring at an open laptop with a blank expression. When she asked if he needed help with essays, he whispered, "It's not about essays." "I don't see the point anymore." The way he said it chilled Leah. She sat beside him and asked if he had been thinking about hurting himself. He didn't answer, just closed the laptop. That night, Leah stayed awake replaying the encounter. She emailed Maya, who replied almost instantly, "We can't miss another whisper. I'll help however I can." The next day, Leah coaxed Lucas into a private talk. Slowly, he revealed the weight he had carried since his father's death 2 years earlier, the way he'd hidden his grief behind straight A grades until the pressure cracked. Leah listened and outlined steps for immediate support, including involving the school's crisis counselor and informing his mother. Lucas didn't resist. He looked more relieved than angry. Winter storms blanketed the town in snow, and the mural was finally finished, a treehouse with a lantern glowing so bright it cast light on a winding path. On the day they unveiled it to the school, Danny stood to the side, arms crossed, but a small smile tugging at her mouth. Tyler stood next to her, unusually quiet. Leah thanked them publicly, then said to the gathered students, "Sometimes the hardest journey is just walking up that path toward light." especially when you think you have to do it alone. You don't. The principal nodded approval, and even a few skeptical students clapped. That evening, Leah sat at her kitchen table, writing brief notes about each student's progress. Maya read over her shoulder and said, "You know, suspense doesn't always need a villain. Sometimes it's about whether the people who need help will reach it in time." Leah smiled faintly. That's the kind of suspense I can live with. But deep down, she knew the story wasn't over. Whispers still lingered in hallways and online spaces. She had to keep listening. Snow still clung to the gutters when Leah found herself pacing the school hallway just before first bell. The mural's glowing lantern seemed almost alive under the hallway lights. It had become more than decoration. Students slowed their steps as they passed it, as if reminded of something fragile inside themselves. But the winter calm was brief. A new post appeared on an anonymous local forum, a blurry photo of the mural with the words scrawled above it. "Light won't save you." Leah's stomach tightened when a colleague showed her the post on his phone. She immediately forwarded it to Maya. Within the hour, Maya replied, "We'll trace where this started. Don't let it spread unchecked." That morning, Leah brought Tyler and Danny into her office. "You didn't post it?" she asked gently. Both shook their heads, eyes wide. "Someone's trying to mess with us," Danny said, voice low but steady. Tyler added, "We can paint over it if it makes trouble." Leah shook her head. "We don't let fear paint over progress." She reminded them that ugly words often came from those unwilling to face their own shadows. But she knew the threat couldn't be dismissed. The words felt personal, an echo of that long-ago night that had launched her into this work. At lunch, she met with Principal Hayes, who looked weary. "Is this just teenage trolling?" he asked. "Or should we be worried?" Leah replied carefully, "It could be both. We need to treat it seriously. Sometimes the first warning is just words online." Hayes sighed but agreed to increase Hall monitoring and alert the school resource officer. Maya, digging into the post, found that the account had been created just a day before and used a VPN. She traced indirect clues, a slang phrase here, a typo there, until she suspected it came from someone local, possibly even a student. She called Leah late that night. "I can't prove it yet," she said, "but it feels like whoever posted that knows the school." The next morning, Leah noticed Lucas in the library again, hunched over his laptop but not working. She sat across from him. "You saw the post?" she asked. He nodded. "Did it make you feel unsafe?" Lucas hesitated. "It made me angry." "Like everything good we build gets mocked." Leah nodded slowly. "Sometimes anger tells us we care." She asked if he'd be willing to join a small group meeting after school, a meeting that would include Tyler and Danny, to talk about the mural and what it symbolized. To her surprise, Lucas agreed. That afternoon, the four of them sat in a circle in the art room beneath the mural. The lantern in the painting cast a golden glow even in the winter light. Leah opened. Someone tried to use words to dim this. "Let's talk about why that matters," Tyler said bluntly. "I used to write stuff like that. It's easy when you don't have to face anyone." Danny's gaze stayed fixed on the mural. "I think whoever wrote it wants to believe the dark wins. Maybe because it's easier than hoping." Lucas rubbed his thumb along the seam of his jeans. "I used to think hope was just fluff, but I'm still here." So maybe not. Their conversation was halting but honest, the kind of talk that laid fragile bricks of trust. Leah felt something shift, four people sharing the weight of being misunderstood but not surrendering to it. The following day, however, a staff member discovered another note, this one scrawled in marker on the back of a restroom stall. "Lanterns burn out." The word spread through the school faster than rumors about dances or sports. Some students shrugged, some joked nervously, and a few avoided the mural altogether. Leah felt the old dread stirring in her chest, the dread of missing a sign until it was too late. She arranged a meeting with Hayes and the school resource officer. They agreed to discreetly check cameras near the restrooms and monitor social media more closely. That evening, Leah and Maya met in a quiet diner, their coats draped over the back of a worn booth. The waitress refilled their coffee as snow tapped the windows. Every time we take a step forward, someone tries to drag it back, Maya said, stirring her mug. Progress, Leah murmured, is a stubborn thing. It needs tending. They discussed whether to hold a school-wide assembly to address the notes, but worried it might give the writer the attention they craved. Maybe, Maya suggested, we let the kids respond, not defensively, but creatively. Make it clear the message won't be erased. The next morning, Leah pitched the idea to the students in her small support group. Danny's eyes lit with a spark of defiance. We could paint more lanterns, small ones, in corners like little beacons. Tyler smirked but nodded. Yeah, make it so they can't scratch it all out. Lucas, more quietly, said, maybe we write notes too. Things that say why we keep going. The idea took root. Within a week, students many who'd never joined before volunteered to help. Small paper lantern cutouts appeared on classroom doors and lockers, each carrying a handwritten line. Your story isn't over. Hope is work, not magic. Reach out. Someone will answer. The atmosphere shifted again, this time not because of fear, but because of collective resolve. The anonymous poster didn't vanish, but their power to chill the air seemed to wane. Yet Leah remained alert. She knew from years of work that those who lash out sometimes escalate when they lose attention. She kept her phone close at night, half expecting another message. One Friday evening, as she locked her office, she saw a small paper lantern taped to her own door. The handwriting was careful and neat, for the one who helps us see. For a long moment, Leah just stood there, the quiet hallway echoing with distant locker doors and muffled laughter. She took the note down and slipped it into her planner, as if storing a piece of borrowed light for darker days. Later at home, she called Maya. I don't know who left it, she said, but it reminds me that the work's worth it. Maya's voice softened. That's the kind of suspense I want in a story, wondering if the good will keep holding on. Leah looked out her window at the snow-dusted street, feeling the tension of vigilance, but also the steady ember of hope. She knew the final test was still ahead. But for now, the lanterns were multiplying, one small light at a time. A brittle March wind rattled the mural's hallway windows, and the lantern's painted glow seemed almost defiant against the gray. The paper lanterns, hundreds now, still clung to lockers and doors, though some edges curled from the damp. The students' notes had become a quiet, stubborn chorus of hope. But Leah felt the air tense again. The anonymous poster had gone silent for weeks, and that silence felt more dangerous than words. Maya called late one night. I've been digging again, she said. The forum account's dormant, but someone's been using a school Wi-Fi guest login at odd hours. I think it's coming from inside. Leah closed her eyes. I was afraid of that. Stay alert, Maya urged, and let the principal know. This might be the last ripple before the storm breaks. The next day, Principal Hayes called an emergency staff meeting. No panic, he said. But we're tightening security and keeping eyes on the halls. If you notice unusual behavior, speak up. Leah watched the teachers' faces. Most looked weary, some skeptical. She thought of the years she'd tried to make them see that early whispers mattered. Now at least they were listening. That afternoon, as students headed out in a drizzle, Leah spotted Lucas sitting alone on the library steps, phone in hand. His face was pale. She went to him. You okay? He hesitated, then turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a text message from an unknown number. The lantern won't save you tonight. A shiver crawled up Leah's spine. When did you get this? Just now. Did you reply? He shook his head. Good, Leah said. We'll report this. And you're not walking home alone tonight. She walked him to the office where the principal called the police liaison. While they waited, Leah noticed Lucas's hand tremble slightly. She rested her palm gently on the desk near his. He didn't pull away. That night, after Lucas was safely picked up by his mother, Leah stayed late in her office. Rain streaked the windows, and for a moment she let her head rest on folded arms. The lantern pinned above her desk looked like a small star in the lamplight. She thought about how easily small terrors could bloom in the dark if no one kept the light steady. Just before midnight, Maya texted. They traced the number. It's another student junior, new this year. He's been posting from library computers. Police will visit his parents tomorrow. Leah exhaled shakily. She'd suspected it was a student, but knowing didn't erase the sadness. Another young life caught in a spiral of resentment and shadow. She hoped intervention could come in time. The next morning, the school buzzed with rumors, but also a strange calm like the air after a storm when everyone checks to see what's still standing. The boy responsible was quietly withdrawn from school for evaluation. Some students whispered blame or mockery. Others looked stricken. Leah reminded her group that the point was not vengeance but repair. That afternoon she gathered Lucas, Tyler, Danny, and a few others in the art room. They sat beneath the mural as soft daylight filtered through the high windows. Someone tried to frighten us, Leah began. But we didn't let the dark write the ending. Tyler shifted in his seat. Guess it is harder to keep hating when you're sitting next to someone painting the same wall. Danny smiled faintly. The lantern looks brighter today. Maybe because we decided to keep it lit. Lucas said quietly, I'm still angry. But I want to help, not hide. Leah nodded. Anger can become fuel for change if we keep it anchored. They spent the hour talking about the small ways they could keep the school safe, not through fear, but by staying present for one another. Maya later called it an invisible net of ordinary courage. A week later, the school held an open evening for families to view the mural and the paper lantern display. The gym was filled with parents, teachers, and students, standing among the warm glow of hundreds of tiny paper lights. Leah stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Danny explain the mural's story to her mother, watching Tyler hand out cups of cider to shy visitors, watching Lucas answer a younger student's questions about hope. Maya slipped beside Leah and whispered, This is what repair looks like, messy but alive. Leah smiled, feeling the first real ease in months. It's not the end, she said. But it's a good chapter. Later that night, Leah returned alone to her office. She unlocked the door and found another small paper lantern taped there. The note inside, in Lucas's careful handwriting, read, Thank you for not giving up on us. Leah sat down, holding the note, eyes stinging. She thought about that first awful night years ago when she had doubted whether her work could matter. She thought about the lantern as more than a symbol, about the fragile but persistent light people could kindle in one another. She knew the work would go on. There would be new students, new shadows, new challenges. But for the first time in a long while, she felt certain the light would keep spreading. She folded the note gently, placed it in her planner, and whispered to the empty room, We'll keep it lit. Maya later included that moment in her article's closing paragraph, writing, In a town once shaken by violence, a teacher and her students chose not to surrender to darkness. Their lanterns, painted, paper, and unseen, remind us that repair begins when someone decides to keep the light alive. Leah's final words to the camera for the story's audience were simple but steady. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever wondered whether paying attention can save a life, please share it. Subscribe to hear more stories that remind us why we must listen, and leave a comment to keep this conversation alive. Every voice, every small light matters.